Greetings, this is James Gillen with As You Wish Talk Radio, broadcasting live from the East City Ranch. It's good to be back on the air. As most of you know, I've been gone. I did a lecture in Sedona, Arizona, sponsored by Yield Alien Shop. And it was an awesome experience, quite a challenging experience, but it was a lot of fun. And it was quite amazing to go to Sedona and turn the TV set on and see my face plastered all over Sedona because they had ongoing ads on the Sedona channel for the event. And I walked into the Yield Alien Shop, and lo and behold, there was a big video screen with, again, Playing Contact Has Begun with all my books and videos. So it's really nice to see that kind of support and to hang out, with the group there. They're such wonderful people. I highly recommend stopping in, saying hi, give Jennifer and Doug a big hug and everybody else there. It's quite an event. Met a lot of new people and had some amazing experiences. Some of which were the Skywatch afterwards, where we saw all kinds of UFOs, and the lot where we were was full of orbs. But I also had an experience there, a wonderful place along the river where we sat and hooked up with some beautiful energy. And the most bizarre thing was I was at a friend of mine's place and sitting in her backyard and saw this brilliant green light move right over our heads very fast and hit Bell Rock and go right into it. That was quite amazing, but because it was just the intensity of that light. And then I saw this pulsing energy step down about 3 levels right over my head at the same time. And it was just crazy, just watching some just crazy events happening there. But, fun stuff anyway. But that was a great trip. But it's good to be back. I've been on the road quite a bit. I keep missing my show due to being on the road, and now I'm back, and good to be back on the air with everybody, and I hope somebody missed me out there. You never know. But anyway, it's been a great show. I've got another show on. I've got Stephen Sindoni on, who is an expert on some of the ancient lore about Shasta and the expeditions up there, and some contacts that were made, and amazing discoveries concerning some of the beings that actually live underneath and have been there for quite some time. But we can just go more into all this. But before I do, I want to welcome Stephen Sindoni on the show. Are you with us, Stephen?
Yes, I'm here, James. Thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate you having me on board tonight.
Oh, great to have you on the show. Shasta has always been a major, kind of like a heart-opening place for me. I always go there when I need some downtime to really connect and be by myself. And used to go to Lake Siskiyou a long time ago. It's gotten a little overdeveloped right now, but had some amazing experiences there and also up on the mountain. But I understand you've had some pretty incredible experiences up there, and just with the research of some of the past history of Shasta.
Well, yes, I have, and I've experienced some of those places you mentioned. Lake Siskiyou, I was there a couple of days ago. Mount Shasta, I've been up on the mountain, and we've done morning meditations. And as you're coming down I-5, as you know, from Dunsmuir, you can see the heart, the shape of a heart on the mountain itself, and it's a sight to behold. And the energy here is very eclectic, electric, and it's an amazing energy, so it's a great place to be, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you tell us some of the past history that you've uncovered concerning Shasta and some of the beings that dwell underneath it, you might say?
Well, I'd like to start first by giving you a little segue into how this all came about, and then I'll share everything with you. But in late 2007, in December, I finished writing a screenplay. It was a comedy screenplay, and at the time I was looking for a challenge, and I spent a couple hours on the internet searching for interesting stories to write about. And as fate would have it, I stumbled upon The Legend of J.C. Brown. After reading the short excerpt from the book, it was written by an author by the name of Emily A. Frank, entitled Mount Shasta, California's Mystic Mountain, I became fascinated by it. For anyone who doesn't know about the legend, I'll briefly tell you what I read briefly was about a man who shows up in 1934 at the late age of about 67, appears in the office of the editor of the Stockton Record newspaper in California, and he spins the tale about a lost treasure he found 30 years earlier while working and employed as a geologist with the Lord Cowdray Mining Company of England. So at this time, James, he gets the Stockton Record editor excited, and they end up contacting 80 residents, including a newspaper editor, a museum curator, a retired printer, several scientists, and other solid citizens, and they form a group, and they plan for 6 weeks to investigate the tunnel with J.C. Brown. The interesting part about this story is after the 6 weeks, they designated a date of June 19th at 1 p.m. that 80 Stockton citizens would await for J.C. Brown to appear. Well, at 1 o'clock on June 19th, J.C. Brown never appeared. So the people waited overnight. They had an overnight vigil, and they called the police in the morning. The Stockton police were called in, did their investigation, but no trace of the man was found. He just completely disappeared. But the 80 people, James, who waited in vain for him that June day, they believed the authenticity of his story, and they believed in the existence of a vast tunnel in Mount Shasta filled with golden artifacts. So that's really the gist of what I initially read, and I became, as I said, fascinated by this little piece of information.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess you further did a lot more research, and did you do a couple expeditions up there to try to find this tunnel?
Yes, I did. But the first thing I did was I wrote down the clues on the internet, and I came up with about 5 clues, and I decided that I was going to go to the New York Public Library and do my own investigation to see if I could solve this 73-year-old mystery surrounding the man only known as J.C. Brown. So that was the first thing that I did in late December of 2007 to see if I could, find this man. So I began by just writing down the clues, as I mentioned, and there was 5 clues that I first came up with. And the first one was, James, was there a man named J.C. Brown? So that was really the most important part, because the legend was of J.C. Brown, but I'm thinking in my head, well, if there was a J.C. Brown, then this wouldn't be a legend today. So in my mind, I'm saying, well, it could go either way. One of the second things I asked myself was, did a company doing business under the name the Lord Cowdray Mining Company of England really exist? Was there a company at all? And if there was a company named the Lord Cowdray Mining Company of England, could it be named after its founder? So these are some of the questions. And I asked myself, because one of the fourth questions I had was, would I be able to find records for geologists? Because the man who showed up in 1934 and claimed he was J.C. Brown said he was a geologist or civil engineer. So the fourth question I was asking was, would the man be a geologist? Would I actually find geologists? And the last thing was, and was most important, would I find a man who was the right age who would match that description of being in his late 60s or early 70s, as per the article that I read on the internet in the book California's Mystic Mountain of Mount Shasta by author Emily A. Frank. So those are the first 5 pieces of business that to me were intriguing, because between you and I've told this many, many times before, but I'll tell your audience here, is that at first I figured that I was looking for a con man, that he must have taken money from people, and I was looking to write possibly a movie like Maverick or something, not having any idea that these 5 clues would be the key to going from a comedy mentality to a search and find investigative reporter mission, and finding a tunnel that finally led to a back entrance to Telos.
Mm-hmm. And so what did you find out? I guess this man did exist?
Well, yeah. Well, one of the first questions, because I began my research beginning in January, right after Christmas there, and the first question was there a man named J.C. Brown? And the answer was no. I was unable to find anyone in the United States who matched that description. So 1 down, 4 to go, I guess. Second question I asked was, did the Lord Cowdray Mining Company exist? Oddly enough, I Googled the name, and yes, I was able to find a record of the Lord Cowdray Mining Company. The next thing I did was, okay, well, the company does exist. Was there a man named Lord Cowdray himself? Well, a little digging. There was a Lord Cowdray. A little more digging. Was Lord Cowdray a geologist, like the man in the legend claimed? Well, another bullseye. Yes, Sir Lord Cowdray was also a geologist. The one question that stood in my mind was Lord Cowdray still alive in 1934 when the man who walked into the editor's office in the Stockton Record of 1934, would Sir Lord Cowdray have been alive in 1934? Would he be, in fact, the man J.C. Brown? Well, it turned out he passed away in 1927. So there was a dead end there. So the one thing that really stuck in my mind, I went back to reading the actual legend that I had, and the one thing, because I kept reading line by line, the one thing that kept coming out at me was the man claimed that he worked for the Lord Cowdray Mining Company as a geologist for all his life, employed with one company. So I said, well, if I'm not looking for the owner, I must be looking for the right-hand man, or I got to be looking for a lieutenant. So I then, channeled my energy in that direction. And lo and behold, James, the answer was yes. The man that I did find was a lieutenant.
Mm-hmm. And so what happened after that? Where'd you go after you established this guy did exist and the mining company did exist?
Well, the next thing I did was I had to figure out, I had to track the man to figure out how this in fact was done, because what I learned was that the man's real name was John Benjamin Body. He was not J.C. Brown as the legend had claimed, and that's why it remained a legend. So I had to figure out, okay, I've got the man the right age who fits the right descriptions, is employed for the Lord Cowdray Mining Company his whole life. I've now got his memoirs as well, so I had some information. So the real question was, where did the man live? Where was he domiciled all this time to make this, stay a legend? Well, I learned that he lived in Mexico the whole time. So I then had to look at border crossings. I was like, well, we got border crossings through Mexico, Canada, and coming through on the West Coast, and also through Cuba, the United States, all ports of entry. So I looked at all the ports of entry and was fortunate to find that in 1904, that Sir Wheatman Pearson, who was really Lord Cowdray, because he was originally born Sir Wheatman Pearson, but then later was knighted and given the title of Sir Lord Cowdray. And once I had that figured out, when I checked the border crossings, in 1904, just as J.C. Brown had claimed when he appeared in the editor's office in the Stockton Record, in a 1904 border crossing, there was Sir Wheatman Pearson crossing in from Laredo, Texas border with John Benjamin Body and two other men coming through on the Mexico National Railway Steamship Company from Veracruz in through Laredo, Texas into the United States. So I was able to verify that first date was correct as per the legend of J.C. Brown when he went into the office of the Stockton Record.
Mm-hmm. So now you established the guy's true identity, and where'd you take it from there?
Well, at that point, I looked at the legend a little further, and he said that in his second time coming up to Mount Shasta is when he discovered the tunnel. Because he said, in the legend, he said he didn't discover it on the first time up there. So upon further investigation, I continued looking at the border crossings, and I saw in 1907, J.B. Body did come back over the border on the same steamship company, but this time he brought with him 3 civil engineers that were employed with the Lord Cowdray Mining Company. And those 3 men, himself and his personal valet, all came over in 1907 and then went up to Shasta, and they were the ones who unearthed the backdoor tunnel to Telos.
Mm-hmm. And now, how did they find this backdoor tunnel?
Well, this is what I was wrestling with, because after looking at all the border crossings, because I was able to determine that on the first crossing, J.B. Body went in with his boss, Sir Wheatman Pearson, W.E. Sayer, and Robert Adams. And then once determining that on the second time in, as per the legend, he went in with 3 engineers, which I mentioned, C.M. Yeomans, John McLaughlin, Fred Kleisner, and his personal valet, John Gilmartin. One thing that I saw next was that on the next border crossing in 1910, J.B. Body lied about ever being in the United States. So here I noticed that, there is definitely, a red flag there. So I had to ask myself at that point, how how did he come in? Why did he come in through Laredo? And how did they travel up to Mount Shasta? And what was the purpose and reason for coming up to Shasta? Because these men did not live in the United States, and they weren't prospecting in the area. So I started to think this must have happened by accident, and I started to research the area up around Mount Shasta. And at that point, I was led to something on the internet regarding the Shasta Springs Resort. Now, the Shasta Springs Resort in the early 1900s was known for the greatest water in the world, the Dunsmuir water, and people would come from all over the world to Mount Shasta. It was one of the elite places to go to in the world for the richest people in the world, and they would come up there and spend their time, and they would drink the mineral water, they would walk the grounds, and they would, partake in the freshness of the area, because this was supposed to be, sacred water, so to speak. So when I was able to determine that they came up there to enjoy themselves, I found a map that showed me the property, and I found an area that I believe that they were walking either near the grounds or on the grounds, where they came across this unusual basalt rock formation, and decided that at a later date they would come back to dig it out. So when I determined this piece of information, I decided that I'd have to come to Mount Shasta myself, take the map with me, and actually find this property and start to do my own expedition in a 10-mile radius of this property, because I believe that if I was right, I would find the backdoor tellers just like they did by accident in 1904 and then opening and going in 1907.
Mm-hmm. So as far as did you have other people on this expedition with you, or did you do it solo?
Well, I did it with one other person. His name is Eric Fidman, and he's my guy up here in Shasta. And when I first got up here, which is interesting, I went to the college to start doing some research, and I met Eric Fidman in the process. I told him what I was doing. Next thing you know, I'm lecturing at the college here in Shasta, the COS College, and started doing a lecture in town. And at that point, I had told the audience that I believe that I'm going to find this back door, but now that I'm here, I'm going to tell you the first part of legend, but now here's what I've discovered on paper, but I'm going to go out and look for it. So a couple days later, Eric and I, we started going out and exploring in certain areas. But there was one piece of information that I held back at that point. I had, in November, and you probably know Renee from LA, and a good friend of mine. I was out with Renee last year in November, December. Mm-hmm. And while I was there, someone had sent me an email regarding an unusual basalt rock formation that a father and his daughter had come across while hiking in Dunsmuir. And on my website, there's a picture of it. And this unusual rock formation struck my interest because in the body of this email that I was sent, the man who went by the name of Brad claimed that while he and his daughter were taking photos of this unusual rock formation, a man appeared out of nowhere, a very tall man in a robe, speaking in a slight British accent, and told them that they had stumbled upon the back entrance of Telos and would they like to come in. Mm-hmm. So the father and daughter said, "Where did you come from?" to the man. He says, "Well, I came through this door." He points to the rock, and he said, "Would you like to come in?" And they said, "Well, we don't want to come in." He says, "Well, then I'd like to swear you both to secrecy." Well, you know how it is when you tell someone, can you keep a secret? They never do. Mm-hmm. So he put his story on the internet, and someone sent me this photo with this story. So when I came here, and Eric and I were doing expeditions, Eric and I told Eric about the story later on. I said, "Well, I'm going to go to Dunsmuir and see if I can find a resident of Dunsmuir who is an old-timer of the town, and see if I can connect the dots and see who this man Brad is." So in his email, it said that he was related to the Van Fossen family of Dunsmuir, so he was a relation too. So the first clue I had was possibly a Van Fossen. So I went down and I met with someone in town who happened to know Brad and told me Brad's last name is not Van Fossen, gave me his last name, and also told me what his email and phone number was. So at that point, I had my friend contact Brad, and just to validate his email and his photo and his claim, and we got an email back. This is the end of May 28th of this year, and the email we got back was, yes, the incident did happen, and these doors close off lava tunnels that lead from Mount Shasta, and they supply the water now, and the wall's been sealed off, and now the lava tubes now are piped, and the water is being used to supply the city of Dunsmuir all their water.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. So they sealed off the doors, I guess. Now, did the Inner Earth guys seal it off, or I guess the city did?
Well, the city did. The city did. It's
Yeah.
on private property, and
Okay.
and they sealed it off, and that's one of the reasons why this secret has remained secret for as long as it has. But the interesting thing is, in the legend of J.C. Brown, he claimed from that spot to where he found the underground civilization on Mount Shasta is 11 miles and 2,300 feet. From this spot is exactly 11 miles from Mount Shasta. So it's uncanny that, in an easterly direction, that X marks the spot, and from there, it leads directly to where Shasta was.
Yeah, you should get yourself a little white hat and put EPA on it, and just say, "Hey, we're here to inspect the water. There's been a spill up top, and we have to get into the cave. This cave has to be opened up, to check out the ground pollution. Who knows? You might be able to pull it off."
Well, stranger things have happened, but the interesting thing is, upon realizing this, I'd gone back on the second time to go back up there, and someone went and took Foam-A-Seal and sealed off the left door, because the right door is used for the water company to go in there and, if something happens to the water, to fix the piping or to do whatever maintenance that they have. But the left door was interesting enough. They put another lock on it, and they sealed it tight with Foam-A-Seal, so that way somebody couldn't go in there. So I found that kind of interesting, the before photo and the after photo.
Yeah. It's like, whoops, I dropped a piece of dynamite.
Yeah, exactly.
But, yeah, it's bad. It's funny how, sometimes people will be sitting on a gold mine of knowledge or other information they could be accessing, and they always settle for some lesser, program going on and seal it off and keep it away from the rest of humanity.
Well, you're exactly right. What was interesting on this rock formation, there were symbolisms, old carvings on there that weren't done by Native Americans, so I was able to see some interesting figures there. I guess you call them petroglyphs, and I was told by someone that, if touched in the right area on these petroglyphs, that a monolithic stone would come out in the front of where this rock formation sits. So we tried and wasn't able to do that, but I was told that basically this back entrance has been sealed pretty good, and the only way to really, get in that is if you were to, dynamite that whole rock formation. But there are other rock formations in that proximity that do exist that will lead under, because in the Dunsmuir area, there are many cavernous tunnels that lead back to Shasta, because all the water in that area comes from Shasta. Shasta supplies the Mossbury Falls and all the waters that come down from the mountains. So there probably could be 50 tunnels. But what I've noticed while going tunnel hunting, I'll call it, or tunnel expeditions, a lot of these tunnels that I found have now been tied off with railroad bars, so you can't get in there. And it was interesting. Two of the people I brought out with me in another tunnel said to me, "Well, Stephen, this wasn't here before you got here in April. They just did this." So it was interesting. I said, well, they must have known I was coming. But in the process of that, I've had a couple people that try to take me on wild goose chases. I guess,
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have made this phone call today, but I was smart enough to follow spirit and, not be guided off into, I guess, Alice in Wonderland's, hole.
Yeah, it gets kind of crazy when you start mentioning gold or artifacts or anything of any, major value. It seems like, you get all kinds of nutcases involved and people of, let's say, less than integrous nature.
Well, that's exactly right. So at this point, I'm very guarded in who I speak with, and I vibrate to a high vibration to begin with, so like minds unite. So I can pretty much deal with dense energy and know exactly where it comes from, and be able to move away from it as quickly as possible, because I realize that I'm going to elevate my spirit, and what I'm a seeker of is the truth. And sometimes the truth can get us in trouble, because there are people that, as you well know, that have had it their way for 2,000 years or more and do not want the truth to be told, because if the truth is told, then they'll lose control of what they've had for so many thousands of years.
Yeah, that does seem to be a reoccurring theme, and especially with this, especially in the field of ufology, I've never seen anything like it. They eat their young in that field, and it's so infiltrated. Even Art Bell said that, but it's so infiltrated right now with people of a dubious nature, or people that want to keep, the back industry, the war industry going, all the back engineering going, and things like that. That it just seems to be a military takeover. And you look at a lot of the people on the boards now, or on radio shows and things, and they're ex-military or ex-Navy, and they're the ones that actually fund the Black Project. So to things like BBS radio and other avenues, there's just a few vestiges of truth out there that are still asking the hard questions and delivering the information, and really getting the truth out concerning these I guess, what would you call those? You would not call them extraterrestrials, maybe intraterrestrials, or I don't know.
Our brothers and sisters.
yeah, I was thinking that's much easier.
Well, yeah, keep it simple. I mean, because through the course of my investigations, there are possibilities, there are probabilities, and then there are certainties. I like to talk about some certainties. And the certainty is this: on this planet, for over 300 million years, man has been on this planet. We've had civilizations crop up, and we've had civilizations crumble. We have dinosaurs have existed, and man has existed at the same time. Dinosaurs have died out, and man has continued to exist. And I will cite something here. In California, in 1866, there was a skull. It was found. It was called the Calaveras skull. And some of you, I'll tell you where to look afterwards, where you can find this information. Michael Cremo also talks about it as well. There was a skull found that was determined to be below the bedrock, below the ice age, the marks of the ice age. And to make it, plain and simple, this man determined that this skull was over 50 million years old and was of Native American indigenous, nature, and it was, civilized man, modern man. He was debunked. He had 8 other Harvard professors from the Geological Survey of California and Harvard as well, on the East Coast, claimed that his findings were correct. They agreed that this was the oldest known skull that was found in North America. 2 years later, he was discredited, and they tried to make a laughing stock of him. Yet, his professors said that everything was on point, and his wife and his daughter mysteriously died. Another thing I like to cite was in 1951, and Renee, who you know very well, brought to my attention a book. It was by Vine Deloria Jr. called Red Earth, White Lies. And in this book, Dr. Lee, Canadian person who worked for the museum in Ontario, unearthed a find that was anywhere, he dated it from anywhere from 30,000 to 100,000 years old, which was, there were 4 groups of people that he found. He found the Salish, the Sioux, the Algonquin, and what he called the bearded white man. And this was about 40 or 100,000 years ago. They were up in northern Ontario before the Ice Age, and at the end of the Ice Age, they came down to North America. The Salish came to the West Coast. The Sioux came to the Plain States, and the Algonquin came to the East Coast. And the bearded white man went up to Scandinavia and worked their way to Western Europe. Now, the interesting part about this is the bearded white men, their aggressive tendency, because they couldn't live with the Indians. So what did? They went to Scandinavia and Western Europe, and they killed the rest of the Neanderthal man. So it's interesting to see that the reason why there's no missing link is because we did not evolve from an ape. Never have, never will. It doesn't make sense. Darwinism is about as bogus as to believe the Bering Strait theory that 12,000 years ago that man came across the Bering Strait from China, went across 6 mountainous ranges through Alaska, brought with him plants, flowers, animals, and that way of life to North America. I mean, that's got to be a very hard concept to believe. I mean, to really be this dumbed down, you got to get everybody to be watching American Idol. You got to watch Jeopardy, or to be watching soap operas and rooting for your favorite sports team. I mean, wake up, America, because it didn't happen that way.
Yeah, well, maybe a massive tornado picked him up and then baled some hay underneath him and dropped him perfectly right on top of it. And that's kind of what they do. I've never seen anything like it. To support their theories and these old programs, they come up with the most cockamamie things I've ever heard, and people buy it.
Well, I'm waiting for Bill. I'll call him Bill Nye, the science guy, to debunk me, because you've got people that in these institutions that have these these positions and titles, and their job is to be debunkers. And if they can't debunk you, they'll discredit you. And if that doesn't happen, you better have a bodyguard, because they'll try to get rid of you. So I mean, this is the method and the way they operate. And so I'm aware of what they're doing. But the thing is, people need to wake up to the facts, because when you go to a library, the reason why they call it a library, James, because L-I-E, it's a library.
Yeah, definitely. I have no argument there. They say history is his story. What about her story? And the one who wrote the story is usually the victor in whatever war went on. So we're really never getting the whole truth, or we're usually only getting one side, and it's usually very biased one way or the other.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, just to know that, civilizations have come and gone. I mean, I could cite one thing very interesting. You could look up in the skies, or you do astronomy. You've got an asteroid belt. Looks like a planet that was disintegrated. I've got news for you. It was.
Yep. Yeah, it was.
And
there's a lot of ancient history that's written about that they don't want to talk about.
Exactly. If you go back to the Vedic history, if you follow Vedic history, you'll see the story is right there. It's in plain sight, but they won't recognize that. And one of the things the British have done through the years, through their, I will say, their barbarization, colonization, and Christianization, is try to hide the truth for the evolution of this planet. And it's about time that we slap them on the wrist and say, you know what, we're not taking it anymore. We are not ruled by you anymore, and it's time that we're all going to wake up.
Yeah, and I know I'm familiar with Michael Cremo's work, which is amazing, where they're finding diodes and ornate jewelry and things 50 million years old. It's just unbelievable. So, I don't think some Neanderthal guy all of a sudden had a vision and decided to create a spark plug or, fashion a very ornate piece of jewelry. It just doesn't add up.
No, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, James, it's probably a duck.
Yeah. Yeah, we have that same problem here. It's so funny watching people try to invalidate what's happening here. And you see this big ship come in, it powers up, throws off all this wonderful violet or purple energy, just gets massive, makes a nice turn, and takes off. And, we have these people that just saw that, and they go, oh, no, it was a satellite. That was an iridium flare, or that was, and we go, it dropped down on us, powered up, and made a turn, made a right-angle turn and split,
Well, the problem was, James, it's not like, like with the movie The Gods Are Crazy, it wasn't like the Coke bottle almost hit him on the head. See, if it almost hit him on the head, then they would say, oh, well, you know what? It's got to be true. It just hit me on the head. So speaking of your ranch there, and because I was there last year, as you remember, and I've been privy to seeing things that I cannot explain. And when asked about it, and when I share with people, and I tell them, seeing is believing. I've seen some things in your ranch that, now that you brought it up, I'll go public, what I've seen that defy conventional logic. It doesn't look like anything that our government has at this time that I've seen flying, over your property. So it's my belief that there's a portal over your property that allows everyone there to see ships power up and see some amazing things, to see orbs, and all the other things that have been cited and testified from people who, have no reason to come up to your ranch to, to say that, this is true if it didn't happen, because, if you see something, you say something, and, you stand behind it. And I don't think, it takes a lot of energy to lie on a regular basis and remember that lie. And I've met many people since I've been on your ranch last year, all over the country, that have told me they've seen the similar things that I've seen. So every one of us, have the same experiences on your ranch. And I would encourage anyone listening to this broadcast today, if they really want to understand the past, to know where they are in the present, to see where the future is going, that they come up to your ranch and actually see that we are not alone, we're all connected, and everything, James, that happens on this planet, you and I, whatever we say, we put out there in the ethers, we affect not only this planet, but every planet in the universe, and there are people that are waiting for us to evolve, to take it to the next level. And as a result of this, there are other people, the controllers, that don't want this to happen, because they know that if we were to wake up now, then the world as they know it will perish.
Yeah, goodbye enslavement through dependency, and on all the other programs they have running.
Well, the programs that they have running right now are, I'm going to tell you something interesting. Me and you mentioned the programs running. Robert Bork, the old, Supreme Court Justice, was asked if there's anybody in prison. Why is everybody in prison? Or and he basically said that the only people that are in prison are prison because of their own consent and their own acceptance of it. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I thought a little further. Well, why is he saying that? Well, in 1933, when this country went bankrupt, and we gave away every American's right to freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and then sold it off to the Federal Reserve Bank, who was a private company. And then they, in turn, created corporate names for us to live under as like straw men, so that way they can tax us, our birth certificates, our titles, everything, so that way they can own us. I realized that if we do not consent to, if we do not agree to, and we say you have breached our rights as American citizens, free sovereign citizens, then everything you say and do is not accepted in a court of law, because I don't identify with that individual that you say that I am, because I am not that being, and you breached our contract, and therefore you have no authority on me whatsoever. Be gone.
What I've seen is on paper, that's all accurate, and but boy, to stand up against this scene, I mean, I had some run-ins myself, and I was just blown away at the lack of justice, the lack of integrity, within the system, and how they break their own rules. And it seems like what it all boils down to is whatever that judge wants to do, he's going to do. And if you don't have a heck of a lot of money, and if you don't play golf with another judge, it's a little more powerful, you're going to be, be sitting behind bars or peeling potatoes somewhere.
That was true up until a couple of years ago. There's a website called TalkShoe.com, where if anybody's interested in sovereignty, that they can go to. I'm plugging it right now because I'm looking at this very seriously, because I learned an old Jewish slogan years ago: if you really want to hurt somebody, you figure a way to stop the money flow or take their money. So in order to change this system that we have now, you've got to break the bank. It's like going to the casinos. You'll never win at the casinos because they hold the money, they hold the cards. So these money changers who hold the cards, they have an illegal system. And I challenge anyone here who wants to change this to go to TalkShoe.com and learn for themselves. And in the next couple of months, I'll be putting together some videos where they can go to, and we'll cite cases and we'll show why you are more powerful than they, because they have no power because of what happened in 1933. Because, James, I've never met a person who's ever went to their court who's won. You get their lawyers, you play their game, and then they say to you, you have to accept this sentence. You have to plea bargain. Wait a minute. The deck is fairly unstacked against you when you come in. Just the fact that you have to go into court, you cannot win. And there's a lot of things, as I said, I'll go into later on, and I'll leave my email address for people to understand this, because I'm taking this to another direction, because as a result of me finding out the legend of J.C. Brown, I've had a lot of things happen to me personally because of my belief in, the truth. And as a result, I've learned that, in order to know where you're going, you have to understand the path and actually see who's controlling the process. Now that I know who's controlling the process, I can now take them out of the process with the help of others who want to listen, because the mind's like a parachute, James. You can only learn if you listen. Right now I'm going to tell everybody in your audience right now, if you haven't seen The Matrix, go see The Matrix after my statement. Mm-hmm. Neo is offered by Morpheus either a red or a blue pill. And he tells him, if you take the blue pill, you'll wake up tomorrow morning and nothing will change, your life will be normal. But if you take the red pill, your life will change forever. Well, most of your listeners here listening today have taken the red pill because they realize that they know they've been asleep. It's time that they wake up. And there are people listening here tonight knowing that I am right. Because we're not in Kansas anymore. Mm-hmm. This situation in 2 years, when this shift takes place, or whatever's going to happen, there's a saying I have, some will, some won't, so what next? Well, the so what next, I like to change and say that if we all now raise our consciousness and go into the love vibration in our hearts and listen from our heart to go to our head, our mind chakra, you'll get the information. The information will come, and you'll realize that you always had the information. You came in here knowing, and all you have to do is follow your intuition. Listen to the, go inside, listen to the heart. Forget about the outside world. Forget about the chatter. Go to the heart of the matter, and you realize that you're going to vibrate to people who have the answers. And what I'm telling everyone here today is, yes, we both know there are things out there in the sky that we can't explain. There are people right now sitting there on the field there that I'll say hello to right now, and some I might know. And they know that in a couple of minutes when this interview is over, they will see something amazing tonight. And my heart goes out with them because I know that we are not alone, and that there are people that are trying to stop this information. And I'm glad that there's a place like BBS. I'm glad there's a place like your ranch. And I'm glad there are people like yourself that have the courage, because it takes courage to stand up, to do what you do, or to speak out for that matter. But what they're going to come to realize is there's more of us than there is of them.
That is the bottom line. Where are we at? 7.5 billion people. What is that? Up against 13 families.
Exactly.
So.
Well, the way I look at it, I saw a man get elected in 2008, Obama, and he had 1 million people, 2 million people supposedly march on Washington. And I thought about it. We have 7 billion people on the planet. My goal is to have 100 billion women and men march on all state governments and take back their rifle-free sovereignty. That's the kind of, and I call that a soft parade, because I believe in peaceful demonstration, because presentation without demonstration is only conversation. So I would lead that procession, because the problem in this country right now, you have people that are Pollyannas, they don't want to die for a cause. I would die for the cause to take back the country that I love.
Mm-hmm. I know there's probably a lot of military people will agree with you, and it seems like, that group is pretty much split as far as, they swore an oath to defend the Constitution, and I'm seeing a major uprising, you might say, even within police departments and the military and everybody, and they're forming groups and saying, we are not going to turn on the American people. We are not going to enforce these illegal plans and these Illuminati programs. And, I'm seeing a major uprising right now, and it does seem like people are waking up. And some of the statistics on these flu shots, they said up to 90% of the people are saying we are not going to get that shot, and this whole thing is contrived. And they know that these viruses are actually man-made and released, and there's people making a hell of a lot of money on these programs. And like we said before, just follow the money. So, but I've seen, they said well over 60% of the nurses said they will not get the shot, and some said they will not even administer it.
Well, one of the interesting things, I just did a YouTube video called Swine Flu Reveal the other day. It's on my YouTube site, which when you give it a chance when we're done, I'll mention it. But basically, Baxter International is a company that was given the contract to make this deadly poison, I'll call it. And luckily in Czechoslovakia, they tested it on hamsters, and it killed the animals. And then they said, wait a minute, you gave us this bad batch. But all the batch was tainted. So knowingly, this company had shipped out, all this swine flu, injections for people to start killing them all over the planet. So, I mean, this is orchestrated by a devious bunch.
Yeah, I think that's called murder, isn't it?
I would think so, yeah.
Knowing, premeditated, knowing this is going to happen, that seems, to me to fit in the premeditated murder category, and maybe something ought to be done about that.
Well, I agree, and something is going to be done because there are people like myself and you who are bringing it out there, and I will say to people, you know what, challenge everything that I say. Please do, because maybe you'll see that there are a lot of truths out there that you, because life is good all the time, so to speak, don't want to open your eyes to what's around you because it's really happening. And though it may not be happening to you, but when it does, at that point it'll be too late because you'll have already been sucked into the vortex of being a contented cow. See, I, on the other hand, was taken out of the box. I was taken out of the paradigm, so I was forced to think. And being forced to think was a good thing because it allowed me to learn what's really, really going on. So I'm thankful that I don't follow my favorite sports team. I'm thankful that I don't watch American Idol. I'm thankful that I don't buy into the morning, noon, and the 6 o'clock news to buy into the rhetoric and the censorship.
Yeah, it's getting kind of crazy. Something just happened here, which I thought was amazing, but actually Fox News came out and brought a crew and filmed some amazing ships. But what was interesting is we gave them just undeniable footage of the door opening here on Mount Adams. All these energies coming out of it. We had massive ships coming in, powering up, 3 in a row, 3 all together in a row, triangles. Just some amazing footage, and they just showed a couple that spun across like meteors and saying, well, they did come and these are the ships. But then they brought a debunker on, as usual, who says, oh, this is nothing more than a meteor or a satellite. And, we have these objects landing on the mountain and morphing from 1 to 3, and tell me a meteor or a satellite. But, the guy says, well, this could be the space shuttle. And, how do they don't even question the debunker saying, well, how did the space shuttle land on Mount Adam and morph from 1 to 3? They don't ask those questions. They just let these debunkers run. Well, I never see anything like it. But they did give me a shot, the last shot at it, and after he went through his debunking thing, I showed that we do have Heavens Above and J-Tracker here. We're using their data showing these are not satellites. And they're definitely unknowns, and so they did do a very fair piece on that end. But I've never ceases to amaze me when you give them this just phenomenal footage, they just don't use it.
Well, when you understand that only 6 companies own all the TV, radio, newspapers, and internet sites around the world, it's pretty easy to understand that censorship is a piece of cake for these individuals.
Oh yeah, and if they were serious about getting to the truth, I mean they were just handed it. It was put right in their hand. Look, here's the undeniable evidence that these things are UFOs. They're unidentified flying objects. We don't have things that can do that.
Well,
give me some other reason. And I'm sure this is just the tip of the iceberg because every day they're probably handed, cures for cancer. They're handed fuelless energy technologies. They're handed all kinds of stories which they don't really do justice. Well,
there is a cure for cancer out there. There are a cure for many, many diseases, but pharmaceutical companies make a lot of money because, they pay all these politicians money. They have lobbyists there handing them things and feeding them, like as if they're giving them candy. So, they're going to have it their way because, part of the word control is con. You have to be conned. And if you're a con, then you become a troll. Then, you walk around, like a zombie. So, if they can't con you, then they can't control you. So that's the big thing, because if you think about it, all religions, are based on the golden rule. And they all are based on probably a 10,500-year timeline. And this is what they want. When you show UFOs or civilizations that have been here for millions of years, that do have a spiritual, essence in nature, because they came here in a spiritual form. The first form of communication was telepathic.
Mm-hmm.
The second form became symbolism, and the third form was verbal. And I believe when it came to the third form of verbal, it was pretty much the fall of man, because now you went from a spiritual being to a being that was more carnal, and you were more in a human nature. But so pretty much we de-evolved, is my opinion. And once we de-evolved, the only thing that they could do was create a theosophical religious type agenda, giving people religions to believe blindly, and using that as their platform to be able to say, okay, now we have the sheep, now we can control the sheep, and we'll give anybody who wants a permit for for a church or religious organization under one precept, that you tell people to believe blindly and things will come to pass. Mm-hmm. So if what people are seeing above your sky tonight shows that there is an intelligent life, there's an intelligent life for over 10,500 years, that supreme energy or that force or that entity that's out there is our brother, might hold the key to the universe. And this is their problem, and that's why they'd rather shoot them down than to have them to coexist with them, because then they would have to share the power or give up the power, or we would not follow along like sheep any longer.
Yeah, exactly. What would happen if a group came and landed here and they said, hey, we transcended all disease and here's the keys? Or, or if they landed again and said, hey, guess what? We've got fuelless energy, anti-gravity, and we have counter-gravity, so you can go several thousand miles an hour without fuel and without tires, and you can build a ship here that's pretty simple, but it's going to last forever. There's no planned obsolescence, And, so basically you'd have the pharmaceutical companies saying, let's kill these guys, You'd have the oil industry saying, let's get rid of these guys, And, what if their message was all about, universal peace and brother-sisterly love and time to clean up our consciousness and environment and move to the next level? Then the war industry would say, wait a second, these guys have got to go. These guys are bad for business, so peace is very bad for business.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed, James, is that the world can only continue in the form that it's in if you allow people to continue to create conflict. Because there always has to be a conflict in this country to have our sons and daughters go to war. And that's why that's why they can have a national emergency. That's why they can say we're going to invoke this executive order, because they need to have a conflict. And without a conflict, then the capitalist society can't exist, and they can't control interest rates up or down, mortgages, and so on and so forth, because they have to create the illusion that there's something bad happening all over the world.
Yeah, and it's coming after us.
Right. Now, if you and I went to Europe, we would be considered the ugly American, yet we're not the one going over there and creating all these wars. We're not the one trained by other countries coming here to our bases to learn terrorist tactics, then being sent back there to be the bad guys and appear that they are, Muslim, or appear that they're whatever. They're not who people think that they are, and people here need to wake up, because there are things that happen on our own soil that defy logic, that happened in the last 10 years, and you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Do not make sense. And I tell anyone, I had someone say to me the other day about, 9/11, whatever, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. And I was talking to Renee, matter of fact, about this, and she says, when you wanted to grow up, what did you want to be? I said, was either an architect, a doctor, or the president. I said, but I didn't, say I aspired to be a conspiracy theorist. I said, but the day I went to school, James, I was 10 years old, and the teacher said at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, by the way, President Kennedy's just been shot. And I go home crying because I was affected by it. My grandfather says, not the way you think it is. And later on to find out that, you know what, my grandfather, other Americans were right, that we had a president taken out in broad daylight, an executive action, and nobody did a damn thing about it.
Yep, yeah. It seems to be a common occurrence, but I really do believe that a lot of this stuff is all coming to the surface, and it will be exposed in the days to come, and hopefully people will find some backbone. Unfortunately, we're out of time. This is a whole new subject we can get into. I agree 100% with this 911 thing, there is no way those buildings could have come down the way they said they did. It's if you talk to any architect, they'll tell you that that's just impossible. That story holds no water whatsoever. You know, and finding thermite and all these other the evidence there that, you know, the firemen even saying that the building was pulled, you know, all of them. And then you got Building 7, you know, that nothing hit it. Why did it go down? You know, and they actually claimed it went down before it went down, so they got busted on there. Their scenario was they jumped the gun on the scenario. But anyway, unfortunately, we are out of time. We could probably go into this on some other show. I'll just have to get a hold of you and bring you back on the air. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, and unfortunately, we're going to have to sign up. So this is James Gill with As You Wish Talk Radio signing off. Have a great evening, and spend some time outside and watch the skies, because there's a lot going on up there that some people don't want you to know about. Anyway, have a great evening. Good night. You know, with the group there, they're such wonderful people. I highly recommend stopping in, saying hi, give Jennifer and Doug a big hug and everybody else there. You know, it's quite an event. Met a lot of new people and had some amazing experiences, some of which were the Skywatch afterwards, where we saw all kinds of UFOs, and the lot where we were was full of orbs. But I also had an experience there, you know, a wonderful place along the river where we sat and hooked up with some beautiful energy. And the most bizarre thing was I was at a friend of mine's place and sitting in her backyard and saw this brilliant green light move right over our heads very fast and hit Bell Rock and go right into it. That was quite amazing, but because it was just the intensity of that light. And then I saw this pulsing energy like step down about 3 levels right over my head at the same time, and it was just crazy, you know, just watching some just crazy events happening there. But you know, fun stuff anyway. But that was a great trip. But it's good to be back. I've been on the road quite a bit. I keep missing my show due to being on the road, and now I'm back, and good to be back on the air with everybody, and I hope somebody missed me out there. You never know. But anyway, it's been a great show. I've got another show on. I've got Stephen Sindoni on, who is an expert on some of the ancient lore about Shasta and the expeditions up there, and some contacts that were made, and amazing discoveries concerning some of the beings that actually live underneath and have been there for quite some time. But we can just go more into all this. But before I do, I want to welcome Stephen Sindoni on the show. Are you with us, Stephen?
Yes, I'm here, James. Thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate you having me on board tonight.
Oh, great to have you on the show. You know, Shasta has always been a major, kind of like a heart-opening place for me. I always go there when I need some downtime to really connect and be by myself. And used to go to Lake Siskiyou a long time ago. It's gotten a little overdeveloped right now, but had some amazing experiences there and also up on the mountain. But I understand you've had some pretty incredible experiences up there, and just with the research of some of the past history of Shasta.
Well, yes, I have, and I've experienced some of those places you mentioned. Lake Siskiyou, I was there a couple of days ago. Mount Shasta, I've been up on the mountain, and we've done morning meditations, and as you're coming down I-5, as you know, from Dunsmuir, you can see the heart, the shape of a heart on the mountain itself, and it's a sight to behold, and the energy here is very eclectic, electric, and it's an amazing energy, so it's a great place to be, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you tell us some of the past history that you've uncovered concerning Shasta and some of the beings that dwell underneath it, you might say?
Well, I'd like to start first by giving you a little segue into how this all came about, and then I'll share everything with you. But in late 2007, in December, I finished writing a screenplay. It was a comedy screenplay, and at the time I was looking for a challenge, and I spent a couple hours on the internet searching for interesting stories to write about. And as fate would have it, I stumbled upon The Legend of J.C. Brown. After reading the short excerpt from the book, it was written by an author by the name of Emily A. Frank, entitled Mount Shasta, California's Mystic Mountain, I became fascinated by it. For anyone who doesn't know about the legend, I'll briefly tell you what I read briefly was about a man who shows up in 1934 at
Greetings, this is James Gillen with As You Wish Talk Radio, broadcasting live from the East City Ranch. It's good to be back on the air. As most of you know, I've been gone. I did a lecture in Sedona, Arizona, sponsored by Yield Alien Shop. And it was an awesome experience, quite a challenging experience, but, you know, it was a lot of fun. And, you know, it was quite amazing to go to Sedona and turn the TV set on and see my face plastered all over Sedona because they had ongoing ads on the Sedona channel for the event. And, you know, I walked into the Yield Alien Shop, and lo and behold, there was a big video screen with, again, Playing Contact Has Begun with all my books and videos. So it's really nice to see that kind of support and to hang out.
the late age of about 67, appears in the office of the editor of the Stockton Record newspaper in California, and he spins the tale about a lost treasure he found 30 years earlier while working and employed as a geologist with the Lord Cowdray Mining Company of England. So at this time, James, he gets the Stockton Record editor excited, and they end up contacting 80 residents, including a newspaper editor, a museum curator, a retired printer, several scientists, and other solid citizens, and they form a group, and they plan for 6 weeks to investigate the tunnel with J.C. Brown. The interesting part about this story is after the 6 weeks, they designated a date of June 19th at 1 p.m. that 80 Stockton citizens would wait for J.C. Brown to appear. Well, at 1 o'clock on June 19th, J.C. Brown never appeared. So the people waited overnight. They had an overnight vigil, and they called the police in the morning. The Stockton police were called in, did their investigation, but no trace of the man was found. He just completely disappeared. But the 80 people, James, who waited in vain for him that June day, they believed the authenticity of his story, and they believed in the existence of a vast tunnel in Mount Shasta filled with golden artifacts. So that's really the gist of what I initially read, and I became, as I said, fascinated by this little piece of information.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess you further did a lot more research, and did you do a couple expeditions up there to try to find this tunnel?
Yes, I did. But the first thing I did was I wrote down the clues on the internet, and I came up with about 5 clues, and I decided that I was going to go to the New York Public Library and do my own investigation to see if I could solve this 73-year-old mystery surrounding the man only known as J.C. Brown. So that was the first thing that I did in late December of 2007 to see if I could, find this man. And so I began by just writing down the clues, as I mentioned, And there was 5 clues that I first came up with. And the first one was, James, was there a man named J.C. Brown? So that was really the most important part, because the legend was of J.C. Brown. But I'm thinking in my head, well, you know, if there was a J.C. Brown, then this wouldn't be a legend today. So in my mind, I'm saying, well, it could go either way. One of the second things I asked myself was, did a company doing business under the name the Lord Cowdray Mining Company of England really exist? You know, was there a company at all? And if there was a company named the Lord Cowdray Mining Company of England, could it be named after its founder? So these are some of the questions. And I asked myself, because one of the fourth questions I had was, would I be able to find records for geologists? Because the man who showed up in 1934 and claimed he was J.C. Brown said he was a geologist or civil engineer. So the fourth question I was asking was, would the man be a geologist? Would I actually find geologists? And the last thing was, and was most important, would I find a man who was the right age who would match that description of being in his late 60s or early 70s, as per the article that I read on the internet in the book California's Mystic Mountain of Mount Shasta by author Emily A. Frank. So those are the first 5 pieces of business that to me were intriguing, because between you and I've told this many, many times before, but I'll tell your audience here, is that at first I figured that I was looking for a con man, that he must have taken money from people, and I was looking to write possibly a movie like Maverick or something, not having any idea that, you know, these 5 clues would be the key to going from a comedy mentality to a search and find investigative reporter mission, and finding a tunnel that finally led to a back entrance to Telos.
Mm-hmm. And so what did you find out? I guess this man did exist?
Well, yeah, one of the first questions, because I began my research